Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia. That is Mike Tagliere. He is back from his week-long stint in his writer retreat, and he is back also on his feet. And we have a great show for you today because we're going to be going through your 15 ADP risers. These are players that we think that are going to start to click up the charts, as one might think, as we get closer and closer to your draft days, and a myriad of reasons why that might happen. We're going to break those players down and the reasons behind those picks. But Tags, before we get started today, you had a social media post late last week where it caught all of us off guard there. And I just want to say, you know, we joke around with each other all the time. You and I have been friends for a long time. I'm just happy you are here and okay. So all the bits aside, man, I am glad. And I know everyone was concerned about you too, but Tags, tell us how you're doing first and foremost, because I know you had a little medical hiccup there, and I know we're all just breathing a deep sigh of relief, you especially.
I'm doing good as far as I know. So when you leave the hospital with a heart condition, they apparently don't want to get you into the doctor's office right away. And I'm learning this is a common thing. This is not, I didn't have a heart attack or anything like that. I was just something. We don't know what. And so they've given me medication to keep my heart rate down until I can get in with the cardiologist, which seems like it's not going to be for a week, which again, I've talked to people that have had heart attacks and things like that. And apparently this is pretty common, which seems pretty crappy because it just leaves you in limbo and it makes you worry about, like, you know, what things can be. But I'm here, I'm talking football, and it's good to be back, man. The retreat was necessary and it did not happen. Some people ask me, they're like, you know, Tags, you know, the novel, obviously don't get into it that much, but no, it actually happened when I came home from the cabin, because I was writing the novel, came home, and it was that night. So it wasn't that. It was, I don't know what it was, but it was something. And but either way, I'm back, I'm here, and we're gonna talk some football.
No, I texted you. I remember as soon as I saw it, it was like, I don't know, it was on there for 3 minutes, and I saw it on Twitter. I was like, what's going on? What's happening? Yeah. And I'm just grateful you're okay, buddy. And we all are here too. You know, Tags, you are the backbone here of what we do at Fantasy Pros and the football side of things. So I don't want to even think of a world without you here doing this. So
you don't have to think of it. I'm going to be here for a long time.
Yeah, please. And you know what? I think it's in your contract as well. Remember, I am your... What was Britney Spears' dad? Remember, it was a conservatorship.
Yeah.
Right. Remember, we spoke about that before you left. That I'm your conservatorship, right? So I'm on. So like, you really don't have the option. So we're just.
And Dan's my lawyer, so you know what he's gonna do.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, it's a lifetime deal here. But look, man, I'm just grateful you're okay, and grateful we're here to talk some football and get your mind off all that stuff too. So I want to get to the ADP risers, but before we do, we got some cool stuff to tell you about going on here at Fantasy Pros, because guess what? The draft kit is available. FantasyPros.com/draft kit. And obviously, you've got total access to the Draft Wizard, the MPB Premium, and also you've got some of the best analysts here working for you. We got your sleepers, your busts, your cheat sheets. It's Tags, it's Yates, it's Dan Harris, it's myself. You got community access chat too for the FP subscribers. And look, what you're trying to do is you understand that we're giving you all the tools to be successful in this draft kit with all of your drafts, with all your different leagues, with all your different formats. We're going to try to have you covered here at FantasyPros.com. So go get that draft kit today. Again, that's FantasyPros.com/draft kit. That's what we want to get you all set up with, because once again, if you get that premium membership too, you have access to so many things, including Discord, where we did some stages last week. Yates and I did a stage together where we answered the questions and talked to the people. We're going to be doing a whole lot more of that in August and throughout the season. I'm going to be running a bunch of those too. Spoiler alert, they're fun. You get to interact with us and really pick our brains about things and try to help you, you know, kick butt in your league. That's what we're here to do. And part of kicking butt is understanding the trends. And I want to start here with a player, because Tags, you've got somebody, a quarterback no less, that you think is going to start to tick up the rankings in ADP as we start to get towards draft day. And it's the Jets quarterback, Zach Wilson. So take me through your thoughts on why Wilson might be a guy starting to move up maybe in Superflex.
That's the thing. I wanted to start this show out just to acknowledge the Superflex players out there. Obviously, I know it's becoming a bigger format, 2 quarterback and all that, because like discussing what quarterbacks are going to move up in rankings is a difficult thing, especially when you're talking about like the top 12. You might see someone float up 1 or 2 spots, but you're not going to see a major jump. Zach Wilson at QB 28 right now in ADP is just it's bananas. His ECR is similar to that, and it kind of blows my mind because we have, when you're playing in 2-quarterback superflex formats, you're looking for a quarterback that is locked into the starting job, that's not going to lose it, and ideally someone with some breakout potential. Zach Wilson is not going to lose this job. They locked into him as this was one of the better quarterback classes in recent memory, and then the Jets had the number 2 selection. They knew Trevor Lawrence was going to go first, and they had the pick of the crop. Whatever you want, you take the player. They knew Trevor Lawrence was going. They locked in on Zach Wilson almost immediately. So they have conviction on this guy. Whether or not some other people believe that he's as talented as they did, that remains to be seen. But you go to the team, and most people don't want to associate themselves with Jets. I get it if Adam Gase was still there, but he's not. This is an entirely new coaching staff, an entirely new, offensive line they've rebuilt there. They've rebuilt the receivers like Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Jamison Crowder took a pay cut to stay there. Denzel Mims now in his second year. Michael Carter can catch passes out of the backfield. Chris Herndon, does he break out? Does he not? But just there's options there for Zach Wilson. And more importantly, they don't have a really stout run game. Tevin Coleman and Michael Carter, I like Michael Carter, but he's not going to be Derrick Henry. You know what I mean? This is not a team that's going to be running the ball 30 times a game with their running back. So Zach Wilson is going to have plenty of pass attempts. He's going to have plenty of rushing attempts. His mobility is actually underrated. So when you talk about a quarterback that you're getting, I have him as my QB 19 ranked for redraft formats, whatever. So I think that he's a very, very solid QB2 and a guy with potential breakout possibility. And you look at the players that he's going behind, guys like Trey Lance, who's not guaranteed to start for 5 weeks. That's really going to hurt you, especially in a 1-quarterback league, if not 2-quarterback league. You look at Ben Roethlisberger. What's the ceiling there? Like, what are we going to get out of Ben Roethlisberger? Derek Carr, we know who Derek Carr is. He's never going to win your fantasy league. He's just a guy. He's a fill-in is what he is. A guy to make sure that you don't put up, 8 points in your superflex spot. Fitzpatrick, Daniel Jones, a guy who threw 11 touchdowns last year. I mean, really? Cam Newton? There's just a bunch of names there that you're like, why are these guys going in front of Zach Wilson? So for me, I would bet money that Zach Wilson is going to rise, especially when people see it's a new Jets coaching staff. Maybe they're just behind on the times there, but once preseason comes around, they see Zach Wilson on the field, he's going to move up.
Maybe also the potential to be a better fantasy quarterback than a real quarterback in year 1 too, which we've seen. Yeah. Sometimes you get ugly points, where you get, it doesn't always look great necessarily for the guy who's trying to find his way, but you mentioned the mobility, you mentioned some of the better weapons out there, might not equal to a lot of wins, but again, this is fantasy, so it might not matter. My number 1 here to start with is T. Higgins. He's wide receiver 28 right now. And I want to remind everybody, when he started in week 3, that was when he became a starter. From week 3 through 11, he averaged 8.1 targets, 74.3 receiving yards, and 15.5 fantasy points. And that's really important to remember and not forget. And I think what happened here, Tags, is when Jamar Chase came in, everybody went, oh my goodness, it's all going to fall apart now for T. Higgins. And you and I, especially, we had very high hopes for T. Higgins this offseason, transitioning into maybe a low-end wide receiver 1. And then everything got knocked down a huge peg, almost to the point where he's on that teetering, wide receiver 2 and 3. And I feel like we're starting to buy back in. I feel like everyone's kind of taking a deep breath. Do you kind of see that happening in drafts? Because I've seen that as well, where T. Higgins' stock is starting to come back up a little bit. And people are realizing, yes, Chase is there, but there might be enough for both of these 2 big dogs to eat.
I think there is going to be enough for 2. And like seeing the ADP down at wide receiver 28, I don't know if it's going to come back up because we're seeing Jamar Chase's ADP come up. So it's like, unless we anticipate both of these guys' ADPs come up, it's tough to say that. That's the part where I don't know. Now, should T. Higgins' ADP come up? Absolutely. I did the projections for this team in, wide receiver 22 and wide receiver 25 is what they came out. The idea of when you're drafting a fantasy football team is to have equity with your pick. If you're taking T. Higgins at wide receiver 28, you absolutely have equity, and I would argue that that's his floor. But then you go into the possibility that Jamar Chase doesn't, catch on the NFL as fast as T. Higgins did. We've already seen T. Higgins do it. In the games with Joe Burrow, he was basically a low-end wide receiver 1, and that was with A.J. Green seeing ridiculous air yards. That was with Tyler Boyd still being I think he was a top 30 wide receiver while Joe Burrow was under center. So there's plenty of power here. The defense is going through a rebuild. The Bengals defense is not good by any means. No. So, Joe Burrow losing some of his legs, maybe he's turning into more of a pocket passer than he was at LSU. So no, I like this one. I like where I'm able to get T. Higgins in drafts right now. And honestly, I look at that area of drafts, Joe, and I'm sure you're like me. you just see, T. Higgins there at wide receiver 28, DJ Chark wide receiver 30, Jamar Chase wide receiver 31, Cortland Sutton wide receiver 32, and I feel like that's just a tremendous value spot for wide receivers because a lot of those guys have top 20 potential, but they're not being drafted like it.
It's what allows you to, if you do load up on running backs early, or you do take that big tight end, whether it be a Waller or a Kittle or a Kelsey, this is where you make up ground. That's the grouping. And I think Tags and I both see eye to eye on that. Before we get to the running back here on Tags list next, I want to remind everybody about our sponsor, Pristine Auction. They got all the cool stuff for the home office, for the real office, for the man cave, for the she shed, also for the cool basement parties that you're trying to like show all your cool memorabilia off. And there's only one place to get that, and that's Pristine Auction. Everything there is authentic. Everything is backed by that certification of authenticity. There's things that are affordable, but if you want to be a big spender and get some really cool big items this football season, because last year nobody could come over and hang out because of the pandemic, now everybody's coming back over and you want to impress everybody. The place to get the cool stuff, all the autographed helmets, all the autographed jerseys, and more is pristineauction.com. So what you do is you register for free. It's free to bid. You only pay when you win stuff at the end of the day. And all you need to do is use that code FANTASYPROS. Again, that's all one word, FANTASYPROS, in the registration field located at the top of the page. And you get a $5 free credit on us. We're paying you to get stuff. I don't know what's better than that. So go to pristineauction.com. Again, that's PRISTINE auction.com and use that code FANTASYPROS. Tags, volume is king. And there's a running back in Atlanta that you think is going to get pretty much all of it. So tell me about Mike Davis and what his opportunity is this year to maybe rise up some of those ADP rankings.
Well, what's funny is that you said there's a running back in Atlanta. Everybody knew who we were talking about. Like, you didn't even have to tease that one because there is no one else. So here's the thing. I've been sitting around waiting saying, okay, I understand the concern and I understand why his ADP is so suppressed. But now we're getting towards the end of July and it's still just Mike Davis. Adrian Peterson has been a name that's been floating out there as like, does Adrian Peterson make an appearance? Le'Veon Bell, these are two running backs that could definitely come in and change my tune. But as we get further and further into the offseason, we've never seen these running backs, Adrian Peterson or Le'Veon Bell, do anything with Arthur Smith. So it's like, why should we be concerned about those two just coming in late in the offseason and saying, hey, they're going to pick up right where they left off in their prime? Both those guys are past their prime anyway, but Mike Davis is the guy. We talked about the Titans offense last year. We went through it, I swear, every single week. It seemed like we were talking about this team breaks efficiency. Now, is it because Ryan Tannehill is really good? Derrick Henry's really good? Yeah, probably, but you still need an offensive play caller to bring the skills out. We've seen that with Adam Gase. Coaches can hinder a player's skill. Arthur Smith changed that offense once he took over as the offensive coordinator. Now moving in as the head coach over there in Atlanta, you have to assume, and they did draft Jalen Mayfield, one of my favorite tackles, guards, a guy that could play on the right side, help out the run game a little bit. He's got the attitude you want. So, Atlanta, not going to be a very, very good football team, but at the same time, they are going to run the ball. We have a starting running back who has absolutely zero competition on the roster right now. So to get an RB26, it feels a lot like David Montgomery last year, where I was saying draft Montgomery. He's not going to win you your fantasy league, but he won't lose it if you draft him as your RB2. I feel that way with Mike Davis. If they don't add a running back here, he should be drafted right around that RB22 range. There's running backs going in front of him right now. Like a couple guys like James Robinson should not be going in front of Mike Davis. Myles Gaskin, that's a debate, but there is competition with Gaskin. There is. Kareem Hunt is a backup running back. Chase Edmonds, there's definitely competition with James Conner. So those are guys that if Atlanta doesn't sign a running back, I will take Mike Davis probably in front of all of them. Gaskin's the one that would deserve the most consideration just because of what he flashed last year. But again, that's a new offense in Miami. They did sign another running back. There's just question marks. So Mike Davis, there is no more question marks.
Is there a lot of precedence for a running back like Mike Davis who is pretty much just a guy in Chicago, then gets released, all of a sudden as a backup, shows up in this huge opportunity here with CMC out, and then goes somewhere else immediately after and becomes the guy? I'm trying to think off the top of my head. It's not a very common pattern that we've seen in the NFL. Do you think there's any sort of worry that attached to Mike Davis, regardless of the volume, because of that?
Well, he just never had the opportunity, like going back to his days in Seattle, he was really good. When he was asked to fill in for Chris Carson, he was really good. But he didn't get very much opportunity. He thought he was going to get that with the Bears. A lot of people were excited about it. And then they drafted David Montgomery, and the Bears just pulled the plug immediately and said, hey, we're going with David Montgomery. And honestly, it kind of made sense, though, like just because they invested so much in Montgomery that they had to do that. But Mike Davis, he struggled on the Bears team, and people are like, well, it's because it's Mike Davis. Look at David Montgomery that year. David Montgomery, his rookie season, was not good. Not good at all. The offensive line wasn't doing a whole lot to help him out. And then Mike Davis goes to Carolina. Wasn't going to get a whole lot of opportunity, but once Christian McCaffrey went down, we saw Davis get the opportunity, and he kind of showcased what he could do with it when given the volume. At the running back position, we don't worry so much about the talent of the running back, which Davis has talent. We saw it last year.
Sure,
but
yeah.
It's more about the opportunity, and the opportunity that he's going to have in Atlanta behind a better offensive line than he had in Carolina. I like him.
I'm sold, Tags. You did a nice job there, as always. All right, I want to cluster a bunch of these guys together here because they're on the same team. I've got Trevor Lawrence on my list here. He's QB 15 in ADP. And again, you can check out all the ADP rankings over on Fantasy Pros, where you know where the latest ADP is. Just go to our rankings section there and click underneath to get these ADP numbers. Laviska Shenault, wide receiver 47. And then I know you've got Travis Etienne at RB 31 right now being drafted. Now, you know how I feel about Travis Etienne. I've been overdrafting him happily already, and I feel like that is a trend we're going to start to see. But I'm starting to wonder the collective excitement about the Jaguars is going to make all of a sudden the ADP of all three of these guys rise. Now, at the end of the day, might be right on Etienne. Maybe Trevor Lawrence does scratch that QB1 conversation at 11-12. It's not impossible considering his athleticism. And then, of course, Laviska Shenault is that piece that injuries have been some issues for him in the past, but how much can he get the football? How much can he be a part of this offense? There's a lot of talk in the fantasy football community about Shenault, and I feel like that alone is going to make his ADP start to tick up. Again, just wide receiver 47 now. I think it's going to crack 40 by the time we're this time in August, a month from now. I think that's a very distinct possibility. Give me your thoughts on these guys and the Jaguars and why you think this ADP is going to rise for these guys.
All right, so Trevor Lawrence, the reason I don't think it's going to raise with him, or I should say the reason I don't think it should raise with him, the idea, and I've been on Lawrence. I've been saying that if you draft him as a late round pick, see what you got there. But there are some negatives with him, right? So Joe, if I were to ask you, like flat out, do you think the Jaguars have a top 18 scoring offense? Do you think that they're basically average or better than average this year in their first year under Urban Meyer?
Probably not. And
right.
and I have hesitation there because I think the world of Trevor Lawrence, and I've seen what he can do, and you and I both know it's a quarterback league. So if he develops quickly and the offense isn't obtrusive to him in a lot of ways, and they tailor things to his strengths and they make him very comfortable in what he's doing, it's the Urban Meyer X factor that holds me back always right now because I don't know what that's going to be. But yeah, I think you're right on that bubble. You're right, and I think I know where you're going with the next part.
All right, so I released an article. It was just literally 2 weeks ago that I put out. It says, "What does team scoring mean to fantasy football?" And Joe, what I can tell you is that 98 out of 108 quarterback ones, top 12 quarterbacks. So 98 out of 108. So only 10 of them that did not over the last 9 years come from a top 18 scoring offense. So essentially, in order to get the equity that you're looking for with Trevor Lawrence, you need him to be one, either an outlier, or two, you need Urban Meyer's offense to produce more points than the average NFL team does, which I don't really have faith in that happening just yet. Now, I'm not saying it can't happen, but I think that's going to pull back Trevor Lawrence's ADP a little bit. As for Laviska Shenault, I know that there's a lot of hype in the fantasy community about him, and I understand it to a certain extent, but we have to stop and we have to look at what this regime has done. This is not the regime that drafted Laviska Shenault. This is a regime that came in and signed Marvin Jones immediately once free agency started. We have DJ Chark, who is heavily involved in the offense. He's going to be, right? You know, he's already flashed number one capabilities. This is a regime that drafted Travis Etienne at the end of the first round and said, we're going to use him in the slot. We're going to line him up at wide receiver. All of a sudden, it's like we're scraping for opportunities. In Urban Meyer, is that going to be a pass-heavy offense? I don't know. There's a lot of question marks about this offense, and I think ultimately that's what's going to hold things back. The one player that I do think is going to move up draft boards is Travis Etienne, and it's because he should. He's a first-round running back. Again, this is the regime that they weren't the ones that played James Robinson last year. They weren't the ones that snagged him, you know. Travis Etienne was brought in for a reason. You know, going back over the last 9 years, I've searched through this. So there's only one running back in that time who was drafted in the first round who did not receive at least 198 touches. That was Rashod Penny. And Rashod Penny, well, to be fair, he never should have been drafted in the first
I
round.
was going to say, I was saying you really should put that kind of evil on him because he didn't deserve to be there in the first place.
Exactly. Chris Carson's better running back. Now people can argue about Etienne all they want. I think he's talented, highly talented. But Urban Meyer went out and got his guy when this team had plenty of other holes. So I do believe that, like, Pete Carroll was a different breed. Pete Carroll is the breed that says, I don't really care the draft equity. I don't care about the money we spent in free agency. I want to put the best guy in the field. Chris Carson was the best guy. Etienne is going to get opportunity, and he is better than James Robinson. James Robinson did a really good job. This is nothing against James Robinson. He did a really good job last year, but that doesn't make him an elite running back that can't lose that job to a first-round pick.
And just to kind of, continue on this conversation, I wouldn't be shocked to see in the first month of the season, James Robinson continue to be getting a fair share of touches in this backfield. I think it's going to evolve over time and probably sooner than later. So if you have Etienne, don't get disgruntled in the month of September. I think that would be a very poor set of judgment. Don't go trading him away in a redraft league. Don't think, this guy's going to be a bust. No. I think it's going to continue to get better as it goes. And who knows, maybe it's going to be really good from the jump as well. I've been drafting him, Tags, comfortably as a flex guy. And I feel like it's going to start to get into that RB2 territory really quickly as we get into August, because it just starts to feel like, and you know what? You said it, and you're correct, deservedly so. And I think that's the biggest point here, too, where you're looking for value all the time. Etienne right now is a value in ADP. That value is going to rise, but we think the potential's there as well. Before we get to the next guys on the list that we've created today, I want to tell everybody about Underdog Fantasy. There's still a month or so for most drafts before they kick off, but the action never stops on Underdog Fantasy, where they have best ball contests that you can enter right now. Their biggest contest is Best Ball Mania 2. That's the tournament for all the chips, baby. It's also the biggest best ball contest in the history of the world, with $3.5 million in total prizes and a ridiculous $1 million to first place. So head over to UnderdogFantasy.com, use the promo code FantasyPros, and you'll receive a contest entry with your first deposit. That's right, we continue to give free stuff away because we're Fantasy Pros and we're cool. We're the fun uncle. That's what we do. We give you fun things. So go to UnderdogFantasy.com, use that promo code FantasyPros, get your free entry to Best Ball Mania 2's tournament, and it's filling up fast, so don't wait too long. Make sure you lock that in. Once again, that's UnderdogFantasy.com. Tags, let's keep going with these ADP risers that you and I have made lists about and we think are going to start to move up as we go. So let's go to another one of the guys on your list, Ja'Marr Chase, who we kind of touched on before with Higgins. But if you had anything else here, we talked about maybe the two of them rising together. Do you see any world where Ja'Marr Chase might even start to leapfrog T. Higgins? Because it hasn't happened yet, but they've been very close, kind of almost like that Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, like the Godwin Evans, the guys on the same team where nobody knows what to make of them, so they just cluster them together in ADP and they just take them back to back. Yep. Is Chase have any chance to go above Higgins in your opinion?
Does he have a chance? Yeah. Do I think it happens? No. A lot of people are anti-rookies. It's a continuing trend throughout the years, and it kind of strikes me as odd because over the last couple of years we've seen a lot of rookie wide receivers make a bigger impact than they ever have. Wide receivers were always the position that you can kind of just say we're going to wait at least a year or two, and then we're going to trust them as we're going to trust drafting them as a top 15 option. Calvin Ridley, nobody wanted to trust him right away, and then all of a sudden he pops out. Now we're drafting him as a top 6 wide receiver. Ja'Marr Chase is an elite talent. I've gone back and I've said this, that him and T. Higgins, if you were to go back a year ago today and say which wide receiver would you rather have on your team, 100 out of 100 scouts would have told you it was Ja'Marr Chase. And in having because some people could have been able to make been like, okay, well, it depends on the quarterback that's throwing to them. We've already seen Joe Burrow throw into Ja'Marr Chase. The two set records together, So T. Higgins, he built chemistry almost immediately with Burrow. Great. But at the same time, Ja'Marr Chase is the guy that Burrow wanted. You don't clamor to get this guy at number 5 overall if you're not going to throw him the ball. But again, this goes back to the perception, and I don't know if he's going to pass T. Higgins, but I do believe he's going to move up as people get closer and closer, and they realize. I think some people are still worried about Joe Burrow and whether or not he'll be ready for Week 1, but based on everything we're hearing, it seems like he's going to be good to go.
I want to talk about another wide receiver too, because all of a sudden out of nowhere, in some best ball leagues and even a couple of just mock drafts I've been running here in Fantasy Pros. We've been using that multi-user draft software. Dan and I were running a draft together with some folks over in Discord, and I'm starting to find myself getting some shares of Antonio Brown. Now, he's at wide receiver 42 right now in ADP. My question to you is, are we living in the past here with Antonio Brown, or are we starting to feel like maybe this second year where he is there in training camp and we know Brady's favored him in the past and he kind of just likes throwing the ball to him, but also the confidence level Brady has in him. I know it's a very crowded wide receiver core, but is there enough here in terms of draft equity that it makes sense to start taking some shares of Antonio Brown, even if it does rise a little bit?
100%. I mean, this is one of the stupidest values in fantasy football right now, and it's because we're not living in the past, because we're not drafting him as a top 5 wide receiver. That's who Antonio Brown was for a very long time. One of the most impressive runs I've ever seen in fantasy football was him finishing as a top 3 wide receiver year in, year out. But this is lowering expectations and saying, hey guys, he's being tremendously undervalued. You're able to draft him as a wide receiver 4, and not even like a borderline 3. Like, he's clearly in the wide receiver 4 conversation as a bench wide receiver. And so if you go and look from the time that he joined the Bucs last year in week 9, he was the number 38 wide receiver. And if we were to remove that one game, the one game basically where he came back, which was on prime time, which is what most people are going to tie everything to, like, he would have been a top 30 wide receiver, because that first game he did struggle. It was like getting his sea legs back under him. We saw the same thing with Rob Gronkowski at the start of the year. He was someone that took some time away from football, and it showed on the football field. Antonio Brown hadn't played a game in almost 2 years. If you look at the final 3 games he played, he saw 27 targets, 19 receptions, 266 yards, and 4 touchdowns. I don't expect him to surpass Mike Evans or even Chris Godwin. What I do expect, though, is him to be close enough to those guys to even warrant a conversation. But when you look at ADP, it's not even in the conversation. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are both going as top 15 wide receivers. Antonio Brown is going as a wide receiver 4. It makes 0 sense, and we're going to do our best to make sure I don't want to say do our best to make sure his ADP rises, but we're going to make sure that those who listen to our podcast know Antonio Brown is one of the biggest steals in fantasy football drafts this year.
And even if it moves up from 42 to 38 or 37 or something like that, still really good return. And it was only about a year and change, because he did play there with Brady in New England for a short period of time. It was short-lived, so it took a year and change for him to get back on the field. So it wasn't too long, but it's a great point,
So if you think the last time he had played was in New England, and then he never played a game with the Raiders, so he had the entire year off, and then he didn't come back until halfway through that year. So it was at least...
Well, he was at the Raiders before the Pats. It was the Raiders journey, and then they cut him.
Well, he had one game with the Pats. Right. I guess I see where you're going with this one.
And I understand. It all starts to blur together with Antonio Brown. It's almost like being at one of his parties where you just wake up and you have no idea what's going on. And God knows I've been to 3 or 4. And after the 4th one, I was like, AB, I'm out, bro. I can't hang anymore at this show. All right, let's go to another one of the players on my list here, and that is Jaylen Waddle, who... Once again, the youthful exuberance, I think everybody's going to start to look at the talent of the player and also where he's playing specifically on the field. And Tags has made some great points about, look, he's going to be there in the slot. Think about all the plays he can make. Think about all the yards after catch. Think about all of those pluses that he gives you to a young quarterback who, if you are not buying into Mike Gesicki like I am not personally, I think Waddle's got to be that immediate pivot where who is the guy that you can really count on a weekly basis that has floor for this offense, but might have an incredible ceiling because of the talent that he has. And Smith winning the Heisman got a lot of the attention, but I think a lot of people will tell you in a lot of ways, Waddle seems like a guy that might be a little bit more NFL friendly in some of the nice way to put it. Now, for me, Jaylen Waddle right now, wide receiver 43, I think that's exactly where I'd want to take the shot on him. But I see things start to rise, and I think the minute we see him and Tua on the field together, if there's any sort of connectivity in the offseason where you're starting to see in those preseason games, I think this is going to skyrocket well past 43, possibly as close to 36, 37, potentially in that range. And I don't know if that's wrong, but right now in early drafts, it's a value. Do you think that Waddle Tags is going to get to a point where people are going to start to draft him on the potential rather than the floor? And maybe that's not such a bad thing?
Oh, that's a good question.
This is why I get the big bucks, baby. I ask the good questions.
This is one of those things where I think that preseason is going to determine a lot with Waddle. He's one of those guys where it's almost like Amir Abdullah. You remember Abdullah's run the preseason that had his ADP skyrocket? Jaylen Waddle's one of those guys because once people see his big playability on the NFL stage. Basically, that's what they're looking for. They've seen it in college. Who gives a crap? It's college. Alabama's a pretty good school that plays some pretty good opponents. Jaylen Waddle, again, if we see him in preseason break off a big play, he's one of those guys that's going to shoot up draft boards, and I would not be surprised to see him go as like wide receiver 36. I wouldn't see it. Where Will Fuller's going right now, because honestly,
and that's why I said that number, because I could see all of a sudden people going, why am I paying the Will Fuller price? I want Waddle. He'll be there week 1. And maybe, just maybe, he's the guy, because we're talking about the young quarterback looking a little bit more like, okay, where's the safety valve? Where can I look? And maybe that's the guy with Waddle.
Yep, and it helps that Fuller is obviously suspended for week 1, so it's going to give Waddle a chance to showcase his ability in week 1. So some people might say, hey, I'm going to draft him with the chance to sell high after week 1 because Will Fuller is going to come back. I think it's going to be one of these things with the Miami team where it's going to be difficult to project who's going to be like consistent. I don't think anybody's going to be very consistent on a weekly basis, which is ultimately what I think helps suppress the ADP a little bit. But again, this really comes down to the preseason and whether or not we see Waddle break one of those big plays.
All right, I want to talk about Corey Davis here. He's on your list, wide receiver 48 in ADP. And Tags, I'm curious about this one because for me, Davis has been available in a lot of drafts around this range for me, and I keep passing. I can't quite get there. I've voiced many times here on the show and to you privately my concerns with Wilson, but you bring up earlier in the show, the first guy you talked about, maybe some ugly fantasy points are out there. Is that the connectivity you have here, and is Davis the guy for you to make that kind of investment in?
Yeah, Corey Davis has been stuck on a team that's been throwing the ball 400-something times per game, or per year. That's obviously not going to
per game would be a lot.
It would, but it didn't allow him to break out in a way that he probably should have. Corey Davis was one of the most talented wide receivers coming out. A lot of people were drafting him as the number 1 wide receiver in dynasty drafts that year for rookie drafts, because he was supposed to be that guy. And he really just there were a lot of contributing factors to him struggling right out of the gate to do with injuries, quarterback chemistry, whatever have you. But we saw after a full season with Ryan Tannehill, Corey Davis really broke out. The Jets liked him enough. And, we could talk about Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is a really good football player, and I like Elijah Moore, but he is a rookie. In terms of what his role is going to be on the team, it's going to be different than Corey Davis. Corey Davis was paid to be the number 1 wide receiver on this team. Denzel Mims, we can compare the two body-wise. They're identical in a lot of ways. Denzel Mims was not polished like Corey Davis, right. But again, they had Denzel Mims in the roster. They didn't know they were going to get Elijah Moore, but again, you don't pay someone like Corey Davis the money they paid him to come in and be a role player. He is going to be the guy on the perimeter, whereas they're going to probably manufacture touches for someone like Elijah Moore, which is fine because I do think that there's plenty of room for there to be 2 reliable pass catchers in this offense, because again, they don't have that strong run game that's going to run the ball over and over the way that we saw in Tennessee. So I think Corey Davis is going to be he's not going to be a league winner. I don't believe that. I think that he's someone that you can draft right now as a borderline wide receiver 5. He's going at wide receiver 48. He's the number 1 wide receiver for his team. There's only 32 teams in the NFL, guys. It's very rare that a number 1 wide receiver for a team would go outside the top 48 wide receiver picks. That's just bananas. So to get Corey Davis as a borderline wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, I believe he's going to see a consistent 6 to 8 targets per game, and then he's going to be a wide receiver 3 more often than not.
Last week we had JJ Zacharyson on the show, and he was talking about just that too. Like, hey, don't shy away from the wide receiver ones on bad teams. Don't forget about that. Even though you don't love the passing attack and all that stuff, there's still enough for those guys to return value because they're still the 1. And that's what it's all about, the lion's share of the targets. Which brings us, ironically, to somebody on my list, which is Elijah Moore at wide receiver 59. Haha. Remember a couple years ago where every single ball that Sam Darnold threw was to Jamison Crowder? Remember that? That was a fun little stretch there. It's pretty much all he could do. And once again, I'm kind of repeating myself a little bit here with this Miami take, but it's the same thing here with the Jets. I don't believe in the tight end. And if the safety valve becomes a guy like Elijah Moore, that's great. Maybe it is going to be a guy like Crowder too. Maybe he could still be that guy a couple years later. I'm always slightly skeptical as the guys start to get a little bit older, especially, guys taking a pay cut. And I don't know how much does he believe in himself necessarily to take that pay cut and stay put. So Elijah Moore or Crowder, I think at wide receiver 59 for Moore, there's possibilities here. And I think people are going to start to be a little bit more aggressive on that possibility, if that makes sense. I could see him moving, maybe not enormously. He's not going to be cracking 50. But I think from 59 maybe to a 52 or 53, that would not shock me. And that's enough where I think it's something to pay attention to in terms of a trend. I want to get to another guy on your list, unless you have something else to chime in here with Elijah Moore, because this is actually a player Tags, let me stop for a second. This is a player you've talked quite a bit about the upside. Do you think people, because they listen to shows like this, are starting to pay a little bit more attention to guys like Elijah Moore?
I mean, it's never a bad thing to have your eyes on someone like that and, draft him with one of your final few picks. Because right now, going at wide receiver 59, like you were saying, that's not costing you much at all. And
no.
It doesn't cost you much to find out exactly who's going to be what. The reason that I'm going to be hesitant to raise his ADP much higher than that is because they were able to work out a reconstruction of Jamison Crowder's contract. Because if Crowder, I was expecting Crowder to be gone, and if Crowder was gone, Elijah Moore to the moon, and then all of a sudden we're talking about a guy that I could probably bring up to around wide receiver 42 range. But with Jamison Crowder there, a guy that has proven the ability to play in the NFL, it's really difficult. And honestly, I was surprised that the team was even willing to work on a reconstruction deal because he's still getting paid, I think, $5 million this year. So it's not like it's a small amount of money. Again, I'm actually starting to wonder if the Jets are going to use Elijah Moore in kind of like this, I don't want to say a third down back role, but a way just to get him touches out of the back, line him up in the backfield, put him in the slot, go four wide
Samuel
sometimes.
Type of thing where he's just maybe not, I don't say gadget because that's kind of cheapening things, but
or Deebo Samuel type.
Right. Yeah. Creative offense. Is that a nice way of putting it?
Sure.
That's PC. Let's say creative offense. He's a creative offense kind of fella. Like Aaron Rodgers, who's just a complicated fella. All right, let's continue on this list of guys we got here. But before we do, of course, one more sponsor to talk about, and that, of course, is Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon is the cereal for you. And you might say, well, what is Magic Spoon? Well, Magic Spoon is not the kind of cereal you just go and you buy in the store and it's got tons of sugar and tons of other crap in it, and you've always got all the high fructose corn syrup and all the other things that are just not good for you. Magic Spoon is a higher end kind of cereal for those people who are trying to take a little bit better care of their health. So it's got 0 grams of sugar. It's got 14 grams of protein, 4 net carbs. It's also 140 calories a serving. It's keto friendly, gluten free, grain free, soy free, low carb, and GMO free, but it's not taste free. It's got some good taste, including some great flavors like cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, blueberry, and cinnamon. So if all of that sounds delicious to you and I've made you hungry, then go to magicspoon.com/fantasypros and grab your delicious cereal and try it today. And be sure to use that promo code FantasyPros at checkout to save $5 on your order. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with 100% happiness guarantee. And that's pretty high standard. 100% happiness. That's only something we can all dream of someday. Remember, get your delicious bowl of gluten-free cereal at magicspoon.com/fantasypros. It's gluten-free, it's grain-free, it's awesome, and it's 140 calories. Fantasy Pros is the code. $5 off on us. Go to magicspoon.com. All right, Tags, let's get to some more players on our list. We got a few more to talk about here, and one of which I know you single-handedly are going to increase this guy's ADP. I have been a fan of this player for many years, and I have lived in frustration, constantly having to run to the waiver wire to find other guys to play for him. The emergence of Justin Herbert was very exciting last year. There's no doubt about that. But you're in my head right now about Mike Williams. So, Tags, he is at wide receiver 49. I am starting to buy in again. I'm trying to love again. And I feel like it's your fault. So I'm going to blame you. I just want you to know already ahead of the season here, I'm blaming you for all the shares I have of Mike Williams, so I hope for your sake they work out, because you're going to have to live with me all season long, every day, coming on this show with you and talking about it. But do you think other people are going to start to see what you see, and the ADP is going to go from 49, and the more they see him healthy in the offseason, start to buy back in? Because the 49 is not based on talent, Tags. It's based on productivity on the field enough. I think that, at the end of the day, is the reason for this 49. Would you agree?
Well, we could say the same thing about, Devontae Parker in 2019. We could say the same thing about Corey Davis in 2020. And that's basically what I was doing those 2 seasons, was like saying to go with the post-hype guy, because everybody wanted Devontae Parker to work out back in 2017, 2018. Everybody wanted Corey Davis to work out in 2018, 2019. And then all of a sudden they got it in 2020 when they had completely removed him from their list. Now, Mike Williams is not being removed from lists, but he's falling to near the wide receiver 50 range. A guy that, when on the field, has produced a 1,000-yard season, has produced 10 touchdowns in the NFL, so he can play. And he did that with the latter stage Phillip Rivers, a guy that most people thought was done with football, that couldn't play anymore. Keenan Allen is there. Keenan Allen is still the guy. don't forget that Keenan Allen has missed a lot of time in the past with injuries. It's not to say that his can't pop up and then all of a sudden Mike Williams has a healthy season. Everyone's injury prone until they're not. It's a bunch of crap is what it is. You can't predict injuries. So Mike Williams going behind guys like Michael Pittman is a joke. Like that's comical, like legitimately comical to me. Devontae Parker, in my opinion, shouldn't even be drafted this year. I would take Mike Williams over him every day of the week. Marquise Brown, are we doing that again? Do you really think like Marquise Brown is never a guy that you're going to be able to rely on a weekly basis? You have to kind of pick and choose your battles with him. I can go through and pick scabs of a lot. Laviska Shenault, you talked about him earlier. I understand people are hyped about him, but he might be the number 3 or number 4 best option on the team in the passing attack in the way that the Jaguars are approaching it. So whereas, Mike Williams, number 2 or number 3, depending on how you view Austin Eckler and whatnot. So with Justin Herbert, arguably the guy who's in the best, I don't want to say the best quarterback of Mike Williams' career, because Phillip Rivers is a borderline Hall of Famer, but where Rivers was at in his career when he was throwing to Mike Williams versus Justin Herbert now, he might have the best quarterback he's ever had playing the game. So again, the injury thing is real. However, it's built into his price, and that's why he's falling as far as he is. So Mike Williams, I mean, wide receiver 5 range? Are we serious?
I feel like you want to just say, "Come on, bro."
Come on,
bro. And you're right. I feel better, despite the injury woes. I feel better about having Mike Williams on my team than Shenault, and I have no problem saying that. And I want to reiterate too, Shenault on my list because I see it happening, and I think it's going to get worse. Whereas Mike Williams, I don't know how much is going to grow. I think there's potential for it too, because sometimes it's just a visual. Like sometimes people can't get over the negativity and they go, okay, there he is. I see him. It's reminding me of why I was excited about him a year ago or 2 years ago. And you see the touchdown numbers. You see how good he is in the red zone, because that's the other thing too, to me, when you're looking for those wide receivers who can get it done in the end zone, he is one of those guys. I mean, he is just impossible to guard down there. When you get anything in that red zone area, anything by the goal line there, cornerbacks just have a really tough time there stacking up with Mike Williams. He is a matchup disaster for those guys. And that's why I get excited, because, man, give me those guys who can score. I hate when that's always the knock on wide receivers, is he scores. Well, he scores a lot of touchdowns. And your problem with this is what? What is the point of football? All right, scoring touchdowns, points. I like points. All right, let's talk about a guy that I think is going to get a lot of points potentially this year, and it's Trey Sermon, running back 44 on this list. Now, I think for a lot of people, and again, I'm just going to say this, there's a hardcore audience of fantasy football people who play Dynasty too, who also watch a ton of college football. They understand who Trey Sermon is. But I think the fantasy football community at large, the casual group tags, doesn't quite have a grasp of Trey Sermon yet. I think they're going to see Trey Sermon, and if and when, and I think it's getting closer to when Raheem Mostert might not be on this team to start, there's going to be a huge ADP surge potentially on Trey Sermon. So he's at RB 44 right now. I'm going to ask you this question. If Mostert is not on this roster opening day, we already know Jeffrey Wilson Jr. starting on the PUP list. So where would Trey Sermon go for you then, if from 44 to what in that set of circumstances I'm laying out? Gallman's still there, but what would be that scenario for you where Trey Sermon, what would be his new ADP in terms of running back?
He would move up into probably RB 25-ish.
Okay, so right at the cusp of 2 and 3.
Yeah, I mean, if Mostert wasn't on the roster, I don't see that happening. But if that does happen, I just, again, with Jeff Wilson's injury, I don't see it happening at all. I'm looking at maybe even RB 23, 24, like in that territory with guys like Mike Davis, because again, I'm a little like Shanahanigans, man. It was coined a phrase for a reason. He doesn't like to use a one-back system, and that's just the way things are. Now, the fact that they traded up into the third round and drafted Trey Sermon, does that change matters? I don't know. I don't think the third round is known as to be like a round that like you have to use the running back, or like it's not a first round running back. Let's be clear about that. So that's the part where I'm a little standoffish, because I still think it would be a timeshare. Wayne Gallman's been pretty productive when he's given the opportunity. So I think somehow, some way, this is still going to be a timeshare.
All right. Shenanigans, by the way, that's where I worked at college. I wore all the flair. All the flair. I was a server there for 2 years. It was very difficult. Hated it. All right, let's talk about another guy on Tags' list here, Rashod Bateman, wide receiver 61 right now. And Tags, I agree with you. I'm already starting to take some late shares. it's wondering how far does the ADP rise where you start to wonder, are you out on Rashod Bateman? Right now, it's easy to be in at wide receiver 61. He's a free square. But do you see this ADP rising? And where's the threshold for you where you feel comfortable with that?
I do see it rising, obviously. He's someone that I compared to Keenan Allen early in the draft process. I like him a lot as a wide receiver. And a lot of the things that I'm almost trying to learn from my mistakes, because when Rashod Bateman was drafted, I was like, I'm going to want nothing to do with him and this and that. And I was like, he's a really good player and I hate fading him in that way. But at the same time, this offense doesn't throw the ball a whole lot, blah, blah, blah. I said the same things about Justin Jefferson last year. And I told people that that I love Justin Jefferson. He was one of the most talented wide receivers in the class, but that I didn't like the landing spot. Stephon Diggs was continually underused in that Vikings offense. And it was like, why do we think a rookie? And then, by the way, a rookie that had started on the COVID list, he wasn't even with the team for the start of their training camp. So I was like, he's going to be behind. There's no way that I'm going to take a shot on Justin Jefferson. So that was a miss on my part. Not on the talent, but more on the situation and trying to project that. So I'm looking at Rashod Bateman, and there's a lot of similarities in that, where he's going to a team where I'm like, they don't throw enough. Okay. But Kirk Cousins, a good quarterback. Lamar Jackson, a good quarterback, a lot better than people give him credit for. And suddenly Lamar Jackson has some weapons to throw to. And it's easy to say that Rashod Bateman turns into the number one target on this team. It wasn't so easy with Justin Jefferson. He had to surpass Adam Thielen, which he did in short order. But Bateman clearly has the path to become that possession style receiver for them. A guy that's coming in right away. There's just no one there that competes with him. Mark Andrews is a tight end. Obviously, he's the one that has been getting most of those possession style targets, but he doesn't even play every snap. Rashod Bateman is definitely worth a flyer where you can draft him. Again, wide receiver 61. Where would I be comfortable? Going up around wide receiver 50 area, because then it's like you're in the territory of guys that and I have no problem if people want to take them there, because again, you're taking guys at that point that are your like wide receiver 5 that you are basically saying, hey, I'm going to find out if this guy's anything right away. And if he's not, I'm able to cut bait with him. I didn't invest a whole lot to do it. It's when you start getting into that wide receiver 4 territory, because usually your wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4 are kind of platooning off of each other. Sometimes you'll play one, sometimes you'll play the other, depending on matchups. Whereas wide receiver 5, I mean, that's easy money. So I'll go with Rashod Bateman around there.
I think the learning from the mistakes thing is a great point too. I think we all had concerns, to be honest with you, about all the wide receivers, especially without training camp being proper and without the preseason, that how is anything going to work out? And I think we're all kind of blown away how good CeeDee Lamb was out of the gate, how good, obviously Justin Jefferson was. And I actually had higher hopes for Jefferson, but he just obliterated everything. I couldn't believe what he was able to do last year, and we'll see. The work ethic of that kid is quite good as well. But Bateman is certainly a fascinating one to me too. And I think they're falling into a comfort level tags about that Baltimore offense, which is all they can do is run the ball. Well, all they can do is run the ball because that's all they've really been able to do with the personnel. And I don't know if Sammy Watkins is going to make a difference either, necessarily in stopping Rashod Bateman from becoming something. But finally, I feel like Bateman's a guy that gives them a chance to, I don't know, evolve the offense a little bit, if that's the right way to put it, right? Doesn't it feel like he's that guy that could help do that? And they have to. They became one-dimensional again. And Lamar Jackson can only do so much. He is just one man at the end of the day. One player left here on the list, and it's mine. It's wide receiver 56. And it's a player that people have loved the talent. They love the explosiveness. They love the offense he plays in. He does not have a problem with being in a good offense. And now people are saying, okay, this is it. It's sink or swim. It's what or get off the pot for Mecole Hardman. Now, Tags, I'm somebody that's willing to let him go. And I understand why people are enthralled by him. It's a very exciting piece there. But you look at Kelsey, you look at Tyreek Hill, you see CEH maybe taking a step forward this year. I know you've talked about that. I feel like people are going to look at Hardman and say, yeah, this is it now. Watkins is gone, and now some of those other targets can go to him, and now Mecole Hardman can show everybody here a couple years into the league he's ready to step up there. And I feel like people want it to happen, so they're going to start overdrafting him a little bit. I think that's a bad decision. 56 sounds about right to me. If it starts to go closer to 50, I don't get the fascination here, because we just talked about Rashod Bateman, right, at 61. That is, I think, a clearer upside there in terms of equity for your draft. So take me through your thoughts on Hardman. Do you think people are going to once again start to overhype him a little bit, and that ADP is going to rise because of the talent?
No, to me, he's another one of those post-hype sleepers that I traditionally like. I just gravitate towards for whatever reason, because I want them after the hype has died down. And Mecole Hardman was being drafted as a borderline top 36 wide receiver just a year ago because people thought his role was going to grow because he was so efficient and they wanted to draft him. And I was one of those people that was saying I could see this explosion going to happen. I really can. But because they had mentioned that they were going to take him off kickoff and punt returns. And then it was announced that they were putting him back on it, which had me concerned about him, which said, I really don't want to draft him, because basically you needed him to get a bigger role in the offense. And in order for that to happen, he needed to be removed from special teams, kind of like Tyreek Hill was for a while there. Tyreek Hill was obviously efficient with every touch he got.
Hardman, that's putting it mildly.
But Hardman has been just as good in terms of efficiency. You know, if you look at the start of his career versus the start of Tyreek Hill's career, different ways, sure. But, you know, with Sammy Watkins gone, a lot of people are starting to draft Demarcus Robinson, which is a terrible mistake. He's just a guy. There's no breakout potential with Demarcus Robinson. If you wanted to draft Byron Pringle or Cornell Powell, I'm cool with that, because those are guys that, sure, there's breakout potential. Do I think it's going to happen? They're late picks. I can't say. But Mecole Hardman is a guy that has flashed in the NFL, that has proven to be a game changer at times. What you want to pay attention to is whether or not the Chiefs are going to use him on special teams. If he's taken off special teams, I'm someone that's willing to draft him in that same range that we're talking about Bateman, because again, we're looking for a potential breakout star and a guy that we can cut. You know, we don't want to draft him too high, because again, we want someone that we don't feel tied to, because we haven't invested a whole lot into them.
All right, just to recap for everybody too, these are the names we were talking about: Higgins, Lawrence, Jaylen Waddle, Trey Sermon, Elijah Moore, Laviska Shenault Jr., Mecole Hardman. That was my list. Tag's list was Zach Wilson, Mike Davis, Travis Etienne, Jamar Chase, Antonio Brown, Corey Davis, Mike Williams, Rashod Bateman. All of these players we think have the potential to be ADP risers, some of which we're cool with rising, some of which we're not as cool with. But right now, all these guys basically are showing up as some values here in early drafts. So take that into account when you're doing all of that. Now, we put the work in, which means we're going to play a little game. And Tags, you know, it was occurring to me yesterday. I was out there on the grill. We had all the cousins over. We had about 15 people over the house, you know, flipping the burgers, doing my thing, right, as all of the dads do. And I felt like the most dad thing that you could possibly say is the phrase, "Who wants cheese? How many cheeseburgers?" And it got me thinking about our little game we play here called Let's Be Honest, right? And let's be honest. Tags, I'm going to ask you a couple of these dad things, this one being the first. Who wants cheese on their burger? That is a very dad thing to say. It might be the most dad thing you could possibly say. And then you got to get the count so you know exactly how many you got. And usually then someone's pissed off and say, well, you're out of cheeseburgers. Well, I asked everybody. You have said this phrase, correct? Who wants cheese? How many cheese, right?
Of course. Who wants cheese in their burger? But it was a short-lived question, because everyone in my household eats it.
You know what? I find that everybody says yes, so I don't even know why we ask it. We feel like we're trying to, like, who are we kidding? Just make them all cheese. You don't like it, just scrape the cheese off. What's your problem, right? Is the cheese is going to ruin the burger? All right, here's some other dad phrases, and let's be honest. Do you say these things? When you're about to leave the house and, you know, your kids getting their shoes on and things, do you say the phrase, "Ready to rock and roll"?
I don't say the "ready to rock and roll." I'll say "time to rock." Sometimes.
Time to rock. Okay.
Yeah.
I say "ready to roll." So you and I together make one full dad. I guess, in that sense. All right. So there you go. I definitely say, all right, you ready to roll? Let's go, guys. Let's roll. You know, ready to rock and roll? Not quite so much. That's it's a little socks and sandals for me. All right. When the bill comes, do you ever say the phrase, "What's the damage"?
No, I don't. No. That is a dad phrase, though. I know the phrase.
Right? That is a total dad phrase. Oh, what's the damage here? All right. All right. Here's one that every dad, I feel like, says. "I'm not going to tell you again." Do you say that one? I definitely
100%,
say that.
100%.
All right. Is there any other dad-isms, let's be honest, that you say that you catch yourself, that you kind of die inside a little bit sometimes, where you go, I can't believe I just said that?
I don't know. I have to think about this one, because these, at the end of these segments, these are things that Joe comes up with and we just like kind of ramble on about. But that's something I have to actually think about.
Well, I feel like as a dad, there's certain other moments in your day too. Like you kind of, I don't know. And like I've got two daughters. They're almost 9 and 11 now, and you know sometimes after a long day or stuff going on in the house, you welcome that trip where you're taking the trash out, where it's just a little bit of silence to yourself. I feel like sometimes it's like a little Zen moment. Sometimes you're like, okay, and you kind of regroup a little bit. And you come back in. All right. Now who's arguing about the hair tie? And no, that's your sister's comb. Don't touch that. And you would think that in my house, being the bald guy, I wouldn't have a hair tie on me at all times, but I do. Yeah. I do. These are dad things I do. Any dad things for you that you catch yourself doing or saying that?
No, I mean, I will say that the one thing you said when taking out the garbage and stuff like that, for me, it's cutting the lawn. I don't mind cutting the lawn. Like for me, it's some sort of exercise. I put on my headphones and it's like, it's quiet. I mean, it's not quiet because I have music on,
Right.
but it's my moment
Yeah.
where I like literally, and now with a riding mower, my son will legitimately run outside and say, I want to sit on your lap while you do it. And, well, who can say no to that? So.
You can't say no because they're adorable and cute, and that's what you do.
And then the headphones have to come off too, because obviously I have to talk to him while we're going through it. So it's no more music, no more peace and quiet, just
That's
little
it.
donut. Yeah, my little donut on my lap and going for a ride.
There you go, baby. All right, Tags, I love you, man. And I'm excited to have you back here. I am glad you had your week off. I'm sorry it ended the way it did. But I just, from the heart, man, I love you, dude. And I'm just glad that you're okay and you're here with us doing football, talking about important things for people to go out there and make their drafts. And I want to remind everybody, too, don't forget about our draft kit, fantasypros.com/draft kit. Go right there. You can get all the access, draft wizard stuff, sleepers, busts, cheat sheets, everything that you need. And make sure you subscribe and look at the different membership options we have at Fantasy Pros. We have some great offerings this year. I told you about the Discord stuff we're doing, the interactive stuff we're doing. Some of that is only for our premium subscribers. So make sure that you think about upgrading to those levels so you can have access to all that, because we're going to take you through. I'm telling you, we're going to be your best friends throughout the season, draft day, and throughout. So also want to thank the sponsors of today's show, Pristine Auction. Again, that's PRISTINE auction.com. Use that code FantasyPros there. Get $5 on us. UnderdogFantasy.com. Getting that Best Ball Mania 2, and you get a free entry from us at Fantasy Pros. And Magic Spoon. Again, everybody loves the Magic Spoon. Go to magicspoon.com/fantasypros and get your breakfast on. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Tags, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.